welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Guys, we have got a lot of stuff going on in the cosmos, so I wanted to take a little bit of time just to break down some of the incoming transits. Some of this I'll also be discussing in this week's astro weather, but I kind of wanted to get ahead of the Mars square Saturn transit that's setting up over the next, over like the next 5 or 6 days. So we've got currently, if we look at the clock here, or the current chart, we've got Mars in the sign of Taurus just recently coming out of this conjunction that we were having with both the north node of the moon and Uranus. Now, for many of us, there has been explosive events taking place as a result of this conjunction, depending on where it lands in your natal chart, and really talks about the speeding up the destabilization or something in regards to our values, our money, our resources, our bodies, and our own personal pleasure. And this is unusual because, as I've said in previous videos, we haven't seen this conjunction specifically between the North Node, Uranus, Mars, and Taurus in a very long time, thousands of years. The North Node, Uranus meet obviously every 15, 16 years, setting up a new cycle. But this cycle that's been brewing from the end of July into early August is, it's got this energy of like impatience to it. Usually Mars does. We've got a debilitated Mars in the fixed earth sign of Taurus. So it's kind of like taking this block and trying to blast through it. So anytime we see this conjunction or anything like that with two major planets and a node, it's going to have reactivation points. So when planets move to square that or oppose that, or for example, when Uranus goes retrograde over this degree, which it will here soon, we're going to see like reactivations of some of those themes. So some of you guys have already had like the big sudden epiphanies or the sudden changes. For the rest of us, they are going to be coming throughout the month of August and also October and November. So it's just kind of depending on where your transits are taking place in your own natal chart. Now, when we see planets conjunct the nodes or square like Saturn, for example, it does affect us collectively. You know, the north and the south node kind of act like a megaphone because it's connected to the moon. So I want you guys to pay extra attention to some of the transits that are going to be happening actually today and tomorrow as the moon goes through Scorpio and we start to see the beginning process of Mars coming into a square with Saturn. So you're going to feel the effects of this square. I don't know about you guys. I'm already feeling it. But you know, it just so happens to be all dancing on, you know, my sun opposition and also affecting my north node. So it does maybe feel a little bit more intense for me. If you're somebody who is a Capricorn or Aquarius rising, or if you happen to have planets within like the 17 to let's say 19, 20 degrees of the fixed signs, so that would be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you're going to feel this as well. But the actual square will be taking place at 22 degrees. And that'll be setting up, pretty much felt the strongest from about August 6th through the 10th, but the square appears to be exactly taking place, I believe, on the 7th. Yeah, so it's going to be taking place on the 7th. When is that going to be? I guess I should have looked at a calendar here. Sorry, guys. Looks like the 7th is going to be Sunday, so that's why I wanted to get ahead of this and put this out before my astro weather, just to kind of touch on this so you guys are aware of what's going on. So yeah, the square is going to be at 22 degrees, and that is, according to degree astrology, that's a degree that's associated with Capricorn. So we're going to see stuff relating to government, things relating to borders, boundaries, limitations, because Capricorn is a Saturn energy. So it's interesting that we have Saturn in Aquarius, also ruled by Saturn, co-ruled by Uranus, in this square at 22. Now, I had thought for some time that Saturn in Aquarius was like politicians, it was organizations, groups, trying to limit or inhibit this Uranus in Taurus transit from kind of breaking free and being really wild. So there's something to be said about the fact that there is a method to Saturn's madness. Like Saturn isn't purely just a placement that's saying like, no, you can't go, you can't move forward, you can't do this. Although for many of us, we're going to feel that way over the next couple of days. I think same thing with the Saturn Uranus square, we're having to really look at what traditions in our life, or what rules, what regulations, what oversight do we actually need to have, and what do we need to actually release and let go of. So we've seen this tug of war since 2021 happening between Saturn and Aquarius and Uranus and Taurus. We saw that square off 3 times in this last year. And now this square is returning. So we're going to be feeling that pretty strongly in September into October of 2022 as Saturn retrogrades back to 18 degrees and it comes into a square with Uranus. Now, it won't be exact, but they're both going to be at 18 degrees. So it's pretty close. And what I've been trying to explain to everybody is just how unusual the astrology that August is, and that really August is that kind of turning point plot twist that's going to be like the domino effect of one situation popping up, which then in turn affects everything else. And a lot of this is because of the grand fixed cross themes that we're going to see. As the sun goes further into Leo, it's going to square the north node, Uranus, Mars. It's going to square the south node, and it's going to oppose Saturn. And the truth is that the astrology between now and mid-August is really quite intense for a lot of people, even if you don't have a lot of fixed placements in your chart. Fixed energy is reluctant to change, and it's going to push back and be feeling like it's being pushed into a corner. And when we see that with things like Mars and Saturn, we can see accidents. We can see people who are pushing something or themselves or their body or a situation too far. Meditating on this, I kept thinking about how Saturn and Mars, I've seen like in my clients' lives, I've also seen it in my life. I think about when I had a transiting Mars square, a natal Saturn, I broke an arm. I broke a wrist, actually. It couldn't have been more like bang on with the astrology. I remember Mars was going through Aries. It was in my 6th house of accidents, or it was on the cusp of my 6th house. Going into my 7th, and I was walking upstairs actually, and this was where was this? I want to say it was like, I don't know, we were skiing as a family, but I was trying to follow somebody, 7th house. I was trying to kind of catch up with somebody, and I was going up steps. I was born and raised in Arizona. I don't know anything about snow or ice. Went up the steps too quickly, slipped, fell, broke my wrist. And that was a transit Mars in a square to my Saturn Neptune in the 4th. So I had lots of perception. I couldn't see clearly. Couldn't see the ice that had formed, Saturn and Capricorn, Neptune, Capricorn, and I broke something. Does that mean everybody will have that experience? No, but I think that what the warnings are for Saturn square Uranus is that there has been bending with Saturn square Uranus. We've been bending to the point where now we're pushing it, and there can actually be breaks. Quite literally, right? Like bones rule Saturn, but we can also see break down, break through, definitive things that come up that can make us feel impatient and like we want to give people ultimatums, or that we're wanting to kind of rush something or push like a circle into, a square peg. It's just not going to work. So we want to be mindful of that over the next couple of days, because Saturn also does deal with like karma, right? And I'm just thinking about this square that's taking place, the 6th, the 7th, and then watching Venus oppose Pluto in the midst of this, which is definitely going to bring some like breakdown revolving around like parenting themes, home, domestic stuff, responsibility. And then also watching the sun start coming into an opposition with Saturn and that square with Mars. Now we're going to see a full moon here in Aquarius, which is going to be hosted by Saturn. And I'm getting ready to actually do that video for you guys for the astro weather for Sunday, because it's a lot to unpack. But in many ways, this is kind of like the harsh reality of what we have to do, right? And so for many of us with the conjunction to Saturn, we're going to feel like there's like a heavy burden, or there's like a heavy commitment, and something that we need to be willing to sacrifice in order to kind of facilitate something for others or a goal. Because Aquarius is positive. It is something that we're hoping and that we're wishing for. It is our collective networks, our groups, our associations. But just looking at, you know, Mars coming, you know, the sun in Leo squaring Uranus, and also the nodes around the 10th, then coming into the full moon, which is going to be on the 11th, and watching Mars get up to this reactivation point that we had when we had a, let me take this off, sorry guys, when we had an eclipse here. Oh, that was 2020. Hold on. When we had an eclipse here. Okay. So we had this eclipse, 27 degrees of Taurus, November 19th, 2021. So Mars is going to be reactivating that. So Mars is going into the same degrees as when we had that. That was a full moon lunar eclipse. So it's going to bring up some of those themes again about what we were emotionally committing to or what we were focusing on. That was a pretty positive eclipse for the most part. It was challenging because it had oppositions to Mercury, and there were still some other things that were kind of getting worked out, but there was a trine to Pluto as well. So there was some building solidly towards the future, especially in terms of joint or mutual, you know, assets or resources. We saw the fall of 2021, lots of breakdown with the markets, and things have been kind of tanking ever since we had that. That was the very first eclipse that we actually had in the Taurus and Scorpio axes. So actually the North Node was still in Gemini. It hadn't fully moved into Taurus yet. So then we had another eclipse here recently where we had a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So we go from the one that we had in the fall that was an exalted moon to now the moon being kind of in detriment, being in Scorpio. The sun is highlighting the actions revolving around what we were kind of manifesting, and then the moon is representing that polarity. The eclipse was actually at 26 degrees, right? So we're going to see that as Mars is now coming into right here, it's going to reactivate both of those eclipses around the 13th, 14th, 15th. So it acts as like that midpoint also, because the sun is going to be coming into the square of those two. So there's both a need to act. I like the Mars trine Pluto. I think that that's going to be a sense of like having a lot of willpower and drive and determination to get something done. We know that Mars in Taurus, it can be a little slow, a little sluggish. It's been banged up with the conjunction to Uranus and also the squares to Saturn, but it's starting to kind of find its stride even in the midst of a Sun-Saturn opposition. But getting back more so to the archetypal themes of this Mars in Taurus in a square to Saturn in Aquarius, you know, bottom line is, you know, Saturn sits in a superior position. Not just because it happens to be in its ruling sign, but, you know, this is the opening 90-degree square from some of the conjunctions that we actually had back in the spring of this year. So you notice that, you know, Mars is 4 signs away. So it's now opening up from the conjunctions that we had back in March. Let me show you those conjunctions again, just to refresh your memory. So we had both Mars and Venus going through Aquarius, and they started coming into conjunction with Saturn. So I'm really highlighting like this period, the March 27th through about April 6th. And we saw that, you know, Mars came into conjunction with Saturn, so it was starting that new Mars-Saturn kind of period. Real strong, serious commitment, determination, and focus to be able to align our drives with our goals. So there's something we've been working on since April that we've been, you know, bringing up and working through, and it's about collective goals and like where we're going for the future, because it's in the sign of Aquarius. This is also when we started to see tensions just ramping up relating to conflict in Russia, Ukraine, you know, threats of war, things of that nature. And part of it's because it was fusing together. I've speculated that this was really big also for financial reasons, that this was going to be like tensions were getting rocketed up intentionally to be able to possibly distract from what's actually going on behind the scenes with taxes, money, crime, you know, things that are wanting to be swept under the table. So it's very kind of distracting, and it was exact. I mean, it was square to the note. So you want to look back at what was happening at the end of March, the beginning of April, because we are going to see a second act to some of this. Now, why is that? Because it's opening up, right? So it represents, similar to like the first quarter moon, right? After a new moon, the first crisis that we encounter, the challenge. Mars energies force us to, you know, squares represent the energy of Mars, so it's putting the pressure on us to react or act in some way. Now, because Saturn is in the superior position, meaning it's going to be willing to kind of uphold some kind of limitation or structure, coming up against the conflict that's happening specifically here with Mars. And Mars is debilitated in the sign of Taurus because traditionally this is a sign ruled by Venus. So look back to what was happening at the end of March and what was kind of building there. Archetypal energies connected with Mars would be passion, impatience, courage, desire. It's linear, right? Mars wants to kind of move forward, but Mars in Taurus wants to take its time. It wants to, you know, smell the flowers, eat all the food, focus on maybe saving or personal indulgences. And like I said, it's coming off of that conjunction with Uranus. So there's already been a little bit of sparks flying here recently. And then Saturn being the energy that is about slowing down, making solid, making something concrete, fortified, your ambition, your goals, and anything that can be about attainment. Now, this is more abstract because it's in the sign of Aquarius. So it's the ideas, the dreams for the future, what is possible, what we could accomplish, what we can create. And it's receiving this square from Mars that's like, yeah, but what about my money? What about my food? What about my security? What about what I need? And my comfort, which seems to be kind of conflicting with the overall theme of Saturn and Aquarius, which is, on one hand, the sacrifices we're willing to make for the better good of humanity and our planet. But I see this as the actual physical repercussions that come from our personal resources and finances. Guys, I know I probably sound like a broken record. I probably sound crazy. But it's very clear to me here that the last 3 months of 2022 are going to be like super wild. And we're going to start to find out that there is an incentive to limit or regulate what we're eating, what we're spending, what we're buying, our personal indulgences, our personal resources, our comfort, anything in regards to our personal banking. That's Taurus. So this is in a way becoming more and more and more rebellious because of that conjunction to Uranus, but also I think impatient, wanting to break free. It's like, I want my money, I want it now, I want my food, I want my security, give it to me now. And Saturn is trying to taper that. So we could see that, you know, they're trying to put a cap on anything in regards to inflation, or they're trying to pass legislation to be able to kind of handle this or handle the situation, but it's kind of wildly breaking free. I think that the theme that we're going to see, and I've seen this a lot, you know, with Saturn Mars squares, is going to be anger, you know, frustration, pent up emotions, things that go kaboom because they haven't been addressed or we haven't dealt with it, or maybe that we're finding that there's stress in some of our financial situations, some of our friendships. You know, a lot of us are having radical changes very quickly. A lot of this is about human consciousness and evolution taking place kind of like at the speed of light, and that we are speeding up timelines. And in many ways, like, I kind of say this lovingly, I chuckle. I've told a few clients this recently. I'm like, the universe doesn't really give a shit about your timeline. The universe is like, we got to get this going. We got to get this going now. So thankfully, I think that the Saturn square does suggest that for us to have clear goals and to have some strong foundation and a focus, or some sense of like timing and planning, we can better kind of navigate some of this impatience that's coming from Taurus. But for some of us who have been resisting change, we've been resisting making the financial changes, we've been resisting cutting off, you know, friendships that aren't really serving our higher good, or jobs that aren't necessarily helping us thrive, you know, that might feel soul crushing and overworked and underpaid, there are really big things that are going to start taking place in our lives that's going to almost like catapult us over the next couple of weeks and like project us into some of these future timelines, and we're going to see change happen. So going back to the bending and the breaking, I mean, we've had bending going on with the Saturn-Uranus squares really since last year. My concern is that if we push certain things over the next week, we may find that something breaks down. You know, I'm optimistic that it could be a breakthrough. And I guess a lot of us, like, dealing with anger and frustration and these pent-up emotions, it's like, what do we do with that? How do we use that for motivation for change? You know, is it that we're finally getting up and doing something because, you know, the pain of staying the same is so much more uncomfortable than just actually making the change? I mean, that's how I've felt it personally. I can only like reflect back on, you know, last year, and last year I had transit Saturn square my natal Mars. And it definitely was a lot of like me seeing where certain things were pushed. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel good in my body. It brought out lots of anger, it brought out frustration, arguments over things. And finally, when that square broke, I kind of realized, you know what, it was a good thing that certain things waited, because I needed time to be able to really work on the Saturn area of my life, and I needed the time to be able to structure things and put things together. So I'm personally a little bit curious of how this is going to play out, because I think it's a lot of, for me personally, like reviewing like, okay, I've done X, Y, and Z, so like now I can move forward with some of the things that I want. It's going to be easy to get frustrated though and have anger if we're feeling like we're being told we're never going to get somewhere, it's never going to happen, there's never going to be a good time. And feeling like our goals are being like a little like thwarted in a sense. Okay, so remember that Saturn needs plans, Saturn needs structure, he needs timing. There needs to be like a group effort going on because Saturn is in Aquarius. And, you know, goals and desires that are associated with Mars, something we're really passionate about. Also, it can either be stifled by the square to Saturn, or it can be something that one almost like can be the catalyst for stimulating the other energy. So if Saturn is too domineering, Mars will get angry and he'll want to move forward. Therefore, the Mars area of your life, Taurus, will become more confrontational. If Mars is rushing too much and not being cautious and not being consistent, or is being too impatient or being too materialistic, Saturn will resist more, and Saturn will almost become a wall. So similar to like the Chariot card, right? We want to get all of our horses in a line. We want to be able to work with the one that's taking a little bit slower and the one that's kind of chaotic. We want to bring those reins in and find a way that we can get everybody on the same pace. This is about motivation and action, and the need to, I think, find the balance and the in-between to better work this energy out. We want to, you know, work with the discipline of Saturn to help better guide and direct Mars so we can get things done. This makes me feel, like I said, it's very connected to the full moon that's coming on the 11th. So just leading up to that, now the moon is in Scorpio. Watch for tomorrow when the moon conjuncts the south node. It's going to oppose Uranus and Mars in Taurus. So to me, that seems quite confrontational. It also is going to be, like I said, you know, in its detriment in Scorpio. So we deal with the pain, the crying, the tears, the fear, the manipulation, the jealousy. But it's conjuncting the south node of the moon. So it's wanting to clear that out. It wants to detox and it wants to purge. But it'll come into a square with the sun. So it's almost like our actions and our actual emotions are not in alignment. And it's also going to come into a square with Saturn. So likely you're going to see, part of this is because we're coming into the full moon energy, and this is going to be the real first opening square here from new moon in Leo, which is crisis in action, and how we work through that and how we kind of clear some of that out. Then we're coming into, right, okay, so there's the square on the 6th and the 7th. We're going to see Venus make an opposition to Pluto, so that's going to bring up some intensity, like I said, in relationships and those dynamics with family and career. And then this full moon, hosted by Saturn, and I'll do a separate video about this, but just the fact that it's going to, within about 2 degrees, square the nodes. And we're still going to see just after the full moon. This is one of those full moons that's going to be hanging around 3 days before and 3 days after. It's not just going to be the day of the full moon. You're going to feel it build. Then we're going to see the moon cross Saturn at 22. So it's reactivating that square. And that's going to be about taking some kind of action and feeling the limitation and the suppression. And then the moon is going to move to square Mars here, and that'll be in the early AM hours on the West Coast on the 12th. And then we see the sun come into an opposition with Saturn at 21 degrees on the 14th. And we see Mars come into a trine with Pluto. So some interesting stuff here. It's very clear to me that it's almost like there's a lot of give and take over the next, 2 weeks. In order for us to accomplish something, we have to be willing to release and break something down, but we also need to be acutely aware with the sun and all of these personal planets, like Venus here pretty soon in Leo, is really going to be about, well, what is the heart desire? What does the heart want? What do we need for creativity? What do we need for our own personal talents? And yeah, I think, the effects of this are going to be very strong for everyone, not just the fixed signs. But if you do happen to have any planets that's between, let's say, 21 and 23 degrees of the fixed signs, particularly relating to this Mars-Saturn square, you're going to feel it, right? Like big time, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So just know that it's like a domino effect, basically, of some stuff that's going to be kind of playing out. And really take into account, like, what are your motivations? Are you moving and working and grinding or producing or spending in a way that is in alignment with Saturn? Because Saturn in Aquarius, wherever it is in your chart, it wants you to commit more so seriously. You're going to see during the full moon whether or not you're in alignment with that. That's going to be the test. To see if you're really, really in alignment with your heart's desires and if you're doing that work. And if you're not, then you're going to feel the bends and possibly even the breaks. And when I say breaks, it could be breakdown, breakthrough, broken bones. It could be breaking things off with people, no longer being able to pay for some things for people, no longer being able to eat a certain way, no longer feeling safe. It could also be the bodies, right? Our bodies, our physical body, Taurus, and whether or not we're feeling like safe and secure. Some of these squares make me feel like there could be like bank runs and people freaking out, going to the bank and being like, I need to go and get my money, or people getting angry and arguing over food or materials or resources and being like, that's mine, and like snatch grabbing things. So we also need to realize that in the end, Saturn is actually, it's going to have an upper hand here on Mars. And their actions have consequences, right? Mars squares Saturn. And if you're driving too fast, you're more likely to get the ticket. If you are spending too much, you're more likely to kind of have some kind of financial setback to get your attention. There's a cause and effect to this. And very much with that full moon, I think that that's also going to be like kind of coming to terms with, this is the harsh reality of the sacrifices and the changes that need to be made in order to better facilitate and come into this particular area of your life. The sun is highlighting the Leo kingdom. So it's, what do we need for happiness, joy, creativity, for love? I think for many of us, this is going to be a realization that in order to better take care of our children or to better take care of our loved ones, that there are some bigger changes that need to start happening in terms of our money and our resources, and our values are changing. That's going to happen with Uranus going through Taurus. But also this like harsh realization that some of our freedoms are potentially being stripped and taken away from us. And how that is also challenging our planets, in Taurus, which is like about either our physical bodies or our security. Like I've said in the past, people might think I'm a little crazy, but there's There's probably another lockdown coming. There's something else coming that is going to be reason to slow things down and limit things. Think back to when we had the Saturn-Uranus squares in 2021. Each of those coincided with things getting a little bit intense and a little bit more strict, and then it would ease up, and then it would get strict, and then it would ease up, and then finally in the fall we kind of saw things ease up. And I think that we're going to actually start to see with this final square, and also just the eclipses that are coming in the fall, what is actually the purpose of all of this? What are they trying to slow down? Are things being created intentionally to be used as a cover or an excuse as for why there is such economic and financial disarray going on? To me, it seems like there are things that are being created and being fabricated to be able to kind of cover some of this stuff. And perhaps Saturn is also trying to put a hold on this, knowing that at some point, in November, when we have the eclipses again, October and November in Scorpio, which will feature, an eclipse in Taurus that's going to square Saturn and be conjunct Uranus. And then finally next year, when Pluto goes into Aquarius, we're realizing that where we're going in terms of society is radically different and it's changing. So it's almost like people are buying time. We're buying time. Whether it's our politicians are buying time, telling us we need more time, everything's going to be fine, while something is being set up in the background, knowing that the financial system is about to collapse. Or we're making excuses and we're trying to buy time in our own life, trying to delay or deny the inevitable. Because what you guys don't realize is that some of the tower moments or some of the breakdowns that we're experiencing right now are actually the breakthrough. And it'll take us until about 2024, when Jupiter goes into Taurus, that we start to realize that it was actually really good, whatever changed in our life. We just don't quite see it yet. But we're also going to have until right about here, when the nodes move to square Pluto in Capricorn, going into Aquarius. This is like another jump off point, North Node, Sun, Jupiter, all being in Taurus. We're realizing we have to work with this new global money or this new trade. We have to learn how to grow our own food. We have to become more self-sustainable. So a lot of people are going to be learning about it. But that Pluto in Aquarius square the nodes is also saying that that is the harder change. And then the North and the South node are going to go into 29 degrees of the fixed signs, which is also going to be very uncomfortable, and bringing up the fact that, change is inevitable. Put this on weeks. Sorry here, guys. And that is also a time where, harsh, big changes are happening as well. Pluto in Capricorn is literally the governing powers and things that are going on with really strong, control. And I have thought for some time that there is this emphasis in going towards a one world government, or that there's something that's kind of brewing, and certain militaries, certain leaders, certain people, they don't want to give up the control. They don't want to give up the power. They're going to try to do everything that they can do to kind of ratchet all of this drama up until we get to this year, before we start to see the breakdown. My point is that really be asking yourself if your motivation is stemming from wanting to see something happen and trying to build something solid and long lasting in your life, or are you trying to rush through something because you want immediate instant gratification? Do you want long-term financial freedom, or do you want to get rich quick scheme right now? Do you really want to run off and put a bunch of money on your credit cards, or does it make sense for you to be thinking long-term about structuring and budgeting and cutting back, so that way you can be able to invest in things that are going to be, more positive for your future? I mean, these are things that we benefit from kind of thinking about and finding ways to manage and deal with, and have an outlet for some of this frustration, because I think that for some of us, we could get angry and punch a wall. We could get angry and get in the car and drive down the street and drive through a stop sign and get into an accident. I mean, these things are super common when we see squares. So if you're feeling this energy, I'm always about, looking for trines as being kind of the outlet, or a way to kind of diffuse the intensity. And certainly one of the trines that are happening is the building Mars trine Pluto, both rulers of the South Node. So I think that this is about motivation and long-term planning and slow and steady winning the race, like one foot in front of the other, and being willing to confront throughout the next week or so some of the challenges in regards to whether or not we feel like other people are on board for some of the life changes that we want to make. And if they're not, it's helpful to come up with a plan and to have like a meeting and set up a timeline or a series of times that you're going to be executing things and miniature goals to be able to get to a final goal. It's also really important to really lean into just what we're truly needing for security, what our heart wants, what we need for happiness and joy and creativity. And for many of us, at least for me, I've realized that during the Mars-Saturn square, it's like if you don't talk about it, it will manifest as a rash or a fever. It'll manifest as like a stub toe and a total cuss fest. One little tiff in an argument, which turns into like this big volcanic blow up situation where all of the things that have been bothering you come out anyway, but they come out in a way that can be very hostile and violent and mean. And definitely not how we want some of these things to come about. So in the midst of the pressure, it's like, what do we do with it? How do we use that Mars and Taurus, trine Pluto and Capricorn, to be strategic and be thinking about the long-term goals, and I would say even more specifically where we're hoping to be by the end of this year, you know, what we can accomplish by the end of this year, and not just in a sense of, oh, let's just get through the year. It's like, no, this is where we'd like to be financially, physically, spiritually, what have you, by the end of this year, and working towards some of those goals, and we can start to see them really kind of manifest and coming together, you know, December, January in the Capricorn season. In the midst of all of this, we've also got Mercury that will be going through the sign of Virgo. Not in shadow yet, so it's strong. I'm looking forward to, you know, Mercury's way of being able to trine Uranus and start coming into a trine with Pluto, which it will do several times because of its retrograde, but we're only going to get the trine Uranus once. To come up with new ways of communicating and like really, you know, breaking down any barriers or any numbers or crunching anything and getting the data and like being able to be like, this is the fact, so what are we going to change? So Mercury can be the voice of reason in the midst of this, although still until we get into Virgo season, the sun really is the star for Leo, and we're going to see the sun come into the square with the moon on the 6th, and then coming into the square with the nodes and also Uranus, which is a kind of like anything goes day, that 9th through, I would say like the 14th, 15th, until we come out of the sun opposed Saturn. Yeah, so there's a lot going on here. We'll talk about this possibly more. I mean, it'll definitely come up during my astro weather, I'm sure, this week, although I'm really going to focus on that full moon in Aquarius because I feel like it's so incredibly big with the opposition to Saturn and the squares to the nodes that it's going to make everybody feel very frustrated and very angry and possibly just be like seeing red. And it is also going to be a supermoon, so it's one of several supermoons that we've had in a row. This is going to be a moon that's going to be much closer basically to Earth, so we're going to be feeling it a whole lot more intensely. I want to let you guys know where in the charts this is taking place, just so you can kind of understand where the action, frustration, Mars transit in Taurus is taking place. That's also receiving some kind of structure or some course correcting or some constructive criticism from Saturn. So that way you can look at your horoscope and you can see kind of what's going on there. Keep in mind that also on the other end of the spectrum, we're going to see the sun going through Leo, so that's going to be the opposite house to wherever Saturn is, and that's going to be bringing up this square. So I'm a Western astrologer. I practice Western or tropical astrology. You're going to get the most out of my predictions by listening to your ascendant first, because that's going to tell you exactly where in your life this is taking place. And then listen to your sun, more for career and your own passion and your own ego stuff, ego drives, and then also the moon, which is going to be more so on an emotional level, what you need to hear. So I'm going to tell you where Mars is, that's where the action, the frustration is, and then where Saturn is, and that's going to be where it's receiving this kind of reinforcement. And Saturn's likely going to be like, yeah, no, slow down, or, you know, do it this way, or, you know, cut it out. So you're going to see lots of conflict wherever Mars is. All right, so let's start with Aries and Aries rising. Aries, for you, this is important because it's involving your chart lord, Mars. Mars moves faster than Saturn. So Saturn is the one receiving the square to Mars, and also it's on the right-hand side, so it's moving away from Saturn. So, Aries, you have Mars and Uranus and Taurus in your second house. So it's this emphasis on self-sustainability, making more money, wanting to have more independence with your resources, wanting to feel like you have spending power, lots of instability possibly going on with resources. And, you know, I feel like for you personally, this is going to be about I think with the square to Saturn in Aquarius, your goals when it comes to resources, you know, where you've been working with other people and making money for other people or helping other people in terms of their goals and their dreams coming true. And you're like, what about mine? You know, what am I doing for me? Be careful with anything in regards to taking advice from groups of people. This can also be like forums and online stuff, or, you know, friends in regards to your spending habits or what you should be creating or building or working on. In a way, Saturn may feel or may present itself like friends that are threatened by, you know, you working on some of your own things, and that you're not as willing to kind of jump in and like be a team player and work with other people. So there can definitely be some conflict there. I could also see there being like group goals or group projects that are going on, and you're wanting to work on things and really wanting to show your talent, but perhaps maybe there's also like a lot of you having to put up either the physical work or the money or the resources to make this happen. And that's important to watch, because it can't be all you funding it or all you doing the work. You know, otherwise there's going to be some challenges also in friendships. For Taurus and Taurus rising, you've got Mars and Uranus in your sign, in your first house. It's in friction with Saturn, which is in your 10th house. So likely, Taurus, you're the instigator with this. There is lots of wanting to break free, wanting to have your own space, wanting to follow your own passions and your own desires. You're getting a little excited. You might be a little short-tempered. Now that's coming into a square with Saturn in your 10th house. So there is this feeling of wanting your freedom, wanting to go your own way, wanting to follow your own desires, and acting out unconsciously because it involves Mars, especially when it comes to anything in regards to your 10th house. So it could be you getting into it with your boss and finally letting him have it because you've been kind of swallowing it and not talking about it. It could be you having conflict also, and getting frustrated with responsibility and feeling of like you're the person that everything kind of falls on. Whether this is like parenting stuff, because Mars does rule your 7th house, so it can be about you going back and forth with a partner about being like, I'm the one doing all the work, I'm the one carrying the team, I'm the one paying for everything, like what the heck? And you can get really short-tempered and really kind of like restless. I would say this for all of the signs, that it's not as doom and gloom as it sounds, although it can be heavy-handed. If we're strategic, there can be that breakthrough. So I think for some situations, like actually kind of clearing the air and being like, look, I've been really frustrated about this for some time. What can we do about this? Is the best method, rather than getting into an argument or getting into a fist fight, which you may feel like doing this time period, Taurus, and really having some issues with some authority figures. So this could be parents, cops, bosses, judges, you know, things like that you don't want to get into it and go toe to toe with some of these people, with Saturn being in your 10th house, because it will affect your job or it will affect your reputation or your status in the world. Gemini rising, you have Mars and Uranus conjunct in Taurus in your 12th house, and this is your deep subconscious zone. It deals with your dreams, it deals with your private life. You might be feeling really restless, having issues sleeping, kind of just, you know, pulling your hair out. It's in a square to Saturn in your 9th house. And to me, this seems like challenges over faith or beliefs, and what you have studied versus what you're coming to realize, and things that are being unveiled from behind the scenes. It can be a really strong intuition that's kicking up right now that you have about things that are going on in the world. And also this feeling that you want to learn more, but it's somehow clashing with what you have learned originally or studied. Faith issues also can be coming up, like people having a crisis of faith or switching religions, or, you know, there's this shift that's going on behind closed doors with what it is that you're actually believing in, or you're practicing, or you're studying, or you're learning. I can see Sudden changes of plans that can come with this, with Saturn in your 9th house in relation to Mars Uranus, where there are travel plans or legal plans or education plans that are thwarted because of something that's going on in the world, or also just being so like restless that you're feeling like you can't focus on some of these 9th house things. So Saturn in the 9th is going to be like, you know, teach the class, you know, finish the diploma, you know, get on the plane, do what you got to do. And Mars Uranus in your 12th is like, I don't know, I can't sleep, so how am I going to pass this test? I can't study for my finals, type of thing. But by the same token, I think that there's more to it than what meets the eye with the third dimension. I think it's definitely a lot more about your seeing like crisis of faith or beliefs in action, which is prompting you to kind of maybe have this like crisis of like, well, what do I believe in, and like what is the light, what is the world, what in the world is going on, and like what is life really about. For Cancer and Cancer rising, you have Mars and Uranus that are in your 11th house of friendships, stirring things up with friends. You're seeing lots of friends having freakouts possibly. You might be seeing that you're bringing new people into your social circle. They might be farmers, or they might be gardeners or cooks, or people who are in cryptocurrency, or they're artists, whatever. Mars, you know, Uranus and Taurus. And it's in a square to Saturn in your 8th house where Aquarius is. So there's a change going on with your friends. And to me, it seems like there can be some conflict because you're either having a bit of an identity crisis because you're like, wait, I'm around different people who have different goals. It can be old friends that aren't dealing well with the fact that you're moving on and that you're going through changes. If you're hiding out with Saturn in your 8th house and you're not talking to people about the challenges that you've been encountering and that you have felt alone, or that there's been a lack of support, friends can basically get a little rambunctious and they can get angry and aggressive and be like, where have you been? Why haven't I heard from you? What's your problem? This is definitely like not a time that you want to be arguing with friends or family over like politics or money. That's something that I would really avoid because that can create some conflict. I think that if you try to come out with some of your philosophies and stuff with Mars in your 11th house, it can, you know, it can really get hit pretty hard, where you can see somebody on social media that like posts some things about their philosophy on politics or money or religion or whatever, and you're going to be like, that is so against my values, and then you get into a heated argument and then somebody gets cut or they get blocked. So we can see that actually happening. Now there is a snipping that's going on, Cancer, where certain friends are cutting you off, or you're cutting certain people off because you're realizing that you want to surround yourself with people who are like go-getters, who are grounded and a little bit more patient, and they're also more focused on really making things happen. So if your friends are kind of moving up in the world and they're making changes, you can have a feeling of being left behind, or vice versa, and it can definitely create some strife, so you want to watch out for that. For Leo and Leo rising, this is Mars North Node Uranus. It's been hanging out in conjunction in your 10th house. Lots of changes in terms of you being an authority figure in the world, your own business perhaps, something in relation to finally standing up and like, you know, really being in charge and being the boss, going for the job, getting it, being able to launch the projects, and really kind of seeing that there's growth coming from your reputation in the world. And the money that you're making also. Now that is coming into square with Saturn in your 7th house of relationships. And I feel like for some of you guys, because you're becoming more assertive and because you're really adamant about what you're wanting to be out in the world, you know, really, really craving more popularity or more expansion in your personal life, you're maybe even adamant about wanting to take relationships to the next level, and you're like, look, I'm leveling up in my career. I want somebody who's doing the same. I want to be able to kind of tell the world, this is my partner. This is my partner in crime. This is what we built and done together. And there can be some friction with a relationship. It can be a friendship or a business partnership as well. But 7th house is relationships. And it's like, as you're climbing this ladder and you're really getting really driven to build this empire, partners might feel like they're lacking, like they can't show up the same way that you are. They're not being the best friend or the best support system, or maybe they're having a hard time with the fact that you're getting all the recognition or that you're calling all the shots. And perhaps maybe there is like a loosening of the bonds that are going on between certain relationships. And so Leo, you're really going to see this month, especially when you become aware of just what it is that you really need and like how you can personally shine And it might be dimming other people's lights, and it may actually affect relationships. And you have a really high standard that you're setting for yourself and for the life that you're building, and you want somebody who can meet you halfway. And I have a feeling that that full moon can really pack a punch, where that can definitely kind of tell you definitively which way this is going to break in a relationship or a friendship or a business partnership. But relationships, Aquarius is friends. So it can also be that, you know, friends are telling you, leave the relationship, don't waste your time. You know, what are you doing? That can come up too. For Virgo and Virgo rising, you've had Mars and the North Node in Uranus dancing in your 9th house, really changing your philosophy on life, perhaps pushing you to travel, relocate, study, visit places that you've never visited before, and really remain, you know, open, you know, develop much more of an open mind about what life has to offer you and what it is that you know, right? It's in a sister sign too, so that's been supportive. But it's coming into friction with Saturn, and Saturn's in your 6th house of health, coworkers, and work. For me, it makes me feel like there can be delays with education. There can be delays with legal or court stuff, because I see that through the 6th house and also the 9th. So if you're waiting to go and travel to a place, there can be delays. If you're waiting to get accepted into a program, there can be delays or setbacks. There can be challenges also with traveling as a result of issues with health or daily routine. Saturn in the 6th can be like, oh, my cat's sick, I can't go on vacation. You know, I got to stay and take care of him. He needs a surgery. It can also be things like, I can't leave the office because it's chaos and we're making a bunch of changes and it's not a good time for me to take a vacation. I could also see it being people knowing that there's a pending lawsuit and something is going to be paid back, especially if it's about education or anything in regards to on-the-job injuries, and you're waiting to get that payment, or you're waiting to see that kind of settle out. For some of you guys, it's just what you're actually learning about the world around you, and how this thirst for either knowledge or expansion or travel is really supposed to be kind of impacting what you do daily, and also like your routine. So eventually, you know, you're going to see with that North Node Uranus manifest in your 9th house. Many of you guys in the next 2 years are going to relocate, or you are going to go back to school, or you are going to decide you want to publish something, and it is going to change your daily routine, and you are going to have to make a change about what you're doing in your day-to-day life. Or because there is much more of an emphasis in wanting to learn about health and wellness, some of you guys will become trainers, you'll go to school for it, you'll become dietitians. So really it depends on each chart, but I think that, you know, that square to Saturn, you want to watch your health. And it can also be about how you're communicating with other people and how you're getting along with people in your daily routine, or possibly even in your workspace. For Libra and Libra rising, you have got Mars and Uranus in the North Node that's been hanging out in your 8th house, really bringing up any issues in regards to joint resources, finances, and anything in regards to where you merge with other people. Now, the 8th house deals also with taxes, inheritance, you know, sexual stuff, death, reincarnation. So I think Mars Uranus there is bringing up like a lot of radical changes in the way that you look at merging with another people. Some of you guys have had breakups recently. Some of you guys have had earth-shattering things in regards to finances, or you're finding out that you're inheriting money. But there's also been an emphasis, because this squares to Saturn, of wanting to grow joint resources so you can make something else happen. So for some of you guys, it's wanting to have more passive income. So you're like, how do I do that? You know, how do I work with another person to generate that? Where do I learn about borrowing and spending and investing, and how investing can make that possible? For other Libra placements, it's also about whether or not you're actually going deeper in intimacy with another person, or if you're kind of at this surface level, right? 5th house is kind of one-night stands, having sex, having fun, not going anywhere, dating. 7th house is more commitment. 8th house is that merger. So some of you guys are feeling like you need to experiment more sexually, or that you need more intense intimacy and to go deeper with other people. Some of you guys are also going back and forth with being like, okay, I don't want to just have sex, I want to have a long-term partner, or wanting to have sex for procreative reasons, like wanting to get pregnant. But the friction that's coming because of the financial hangups with Uranus in the 8th, where you can have partners that are really freaked out about it, they're not ready for it, financially don't feel like they're ready for it, and it can be causing some strife. And I think that with Saturn in your 5th house, it's basically saying, what are you committing to? What does your heart need? What do you love to do? And because Mars and also, you know, Uranus are in the 8th, there's going to be some harsh conversations you're going to have with people about you being like, look, in order to go to the next step, we need to do X, Y, and Z. This is what I need, you know? Or it can also be having conversations with people and basically being like, look, if we're friends, we're not having sex. Because that's something I'm reserving for relationships, and I really want to see relationships kind of unfold and really open up in my life. So uncomfortable conversations definitely for you, Libra, but I think that it's also about holding space for that Saturn in the 5th, and whether that's, you know, saving money and being able to launch your own business, or if this is about learning more about borrowing and lending and loans and things so you can, you know, maybe launch a business, or if it's just getting on the same page emotionally and, you know, psychologically with another person, because Mars rules your 7th house, so that way you can fulfill what you want in the 5th. For Libra and Libra rising, for Scorpio and Scorpio rising, 2 Libras. For Scorpio, this is important because it is a transit that involves Mars, and Mars is your chart ruler. Mars is going through your 7th house, so you are Mars. Remember this, similar to Aries, wherever Mars is going, that's kind of you. It's kind of a little bit like a mirror, and I've said this in previous videos, but Mars going into your 7th house is definitely bringing up some strife with other people. You can be bringing this out in other people because Mars is coming into conjunction with Uranus, and it's about dealing with the past, okay, because Uranus is the 4th house. It's also disruptions in the home, problems with relationships and family, you know, where family members don't like partners, where partners have issues about the past and they're bringing it up and it's something that upsets them and therefore creates conflict in the relationship. That's the Mars-Uranus conjunction. Lots of impatientness in regards to home and things like that because of the squares to Saturn. So for you, Scorpio, it's a little bit of both. There is a sense with the South Node going through your 1st house and also Mars going through your 7th that, like, with that North Node, relationships are ramping up. Like, there is an evolution going on in your relationships, and you're going to see things progress very quickly. So if you're single and you're not in a relationship, it's about going in that direction. If you are in a relationship and there is the need to kind of evolve and go to the next step, go from being, you know, just seeing each other casually to committed, go from being engaged to finally getting married, go from being unhappy for several years and realizing you want out to finally getting divorced, these things can happen. With the square to Saturn in your 4th, it's, I think, family and like the past. So it can be saying like there's a lot of reflecting on the past, that there can be previous family patterning or problems that are playing out in current relationships. There can also be issues relating to property and real estate. And I've seen some people who are like, we can't get divorced because we can't afford to, you know, sell the house right now, or, you know, the house isn't ready yet and we want to separate, but we got to sell it. I've also seen lots of conflict that's happened where other family get involved with Saturn in the 4th. And if you're having issues in relationships, somehow family gets tied into it, and then family can kind of intermingle and cause some problems. I also feel like with all the planets going through Leo right now, you're really adamant about like your career and where your life is going and what you're building and what you're creating. And then there's going to be this harsh reality that it's not just about you, that there's your family, there's your spouse, there's your roommates, there's like other people who are like, we need this too. Keep in mind that wherever Saturn in the North Node is for all of the signs, that's where you're really supposed to be paying attention this year. And for Scorpio, it's not really so much about your career. It's about your home life, your home base, where you're living, what you're building, developing a home, getting all that together. And then also it's going to be about how you're really looking to relationships to kind of like let them lead you and being like a little bit more selfless. Now, for some of you guys who are single, you're like, how does this apply to me? It can be that you start questioning whether or not if you're going to meet somebody with where you're living, and if you're willing to make changes in where you're living, or be willing to meet somebody who's outside of the city that you're in, Saturn in your 4th. So you might be willing to try new and unusual and innovative relationships, or relationships that are at a distance. We could see there's this breakthrough very quickly, and then it's like we do move in together, and we start to see domestic union. But for those of you guys who are partnered, it can be a little bit more challenging. So just keep that in mind, that there can be people who are like, okay, well, if we do separate, what do we do with the house? And what do we do with the things? And, you know, what do we do with like all of our belongings? And like, it can get kind of messy. So we don't want to be giving ultimatums. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, you have got the Mars-Uranus North Node conjunction. It's been in your 6th house, shaking up your diet, shaking up your routine, where you're working, how you're working, maybe hiring people, maybe going independent in some way. There's been friction to Saturn in your 3rd, and I feel like there's been like this hurdle of like trying to overcome the mental mindset of your day in, day out grind, you know? So there's something that's going on with how you're talking to yourself, how you're thinking, how you're communicating with yourself. Perhaps you're not getting enough time to just go for a walk or go for a bike ride. You're not getting enough time to sit down and read. You're having a difficult time breaking through that you are your thoughts, and you can be dealing with some really challenging negative thought patterning or just habits or patterns that you're having a hard time breaking, and it can deal with your mental state. There can also be challenges revolving around like health of siblings. There can be challenges with vehicles and delays with vehicles. There's been issues with scheduling because of moving. So if you've been moving house, moving office, it's probably felt like it's been overwhelming because it's like you're never ever fully getting settled into anything because your schedule is always full. And there's this long list of things that you're having to do with the eclipses in your 6th house, and it disrupts what you can actually get done, and then you get into this mental mind loop. Watch out for pets' health as well. I think that there can be some stuff going on here where Saturn is really challenging like the 6th house. And if there is something you have to take care of, or if something is not good for your mental health, or if you have to tell them, no, I can't come into work right now, I'm dealing with something, like that Saturn is going to be about speaking up and saying something. So there can be some things that come up health or schedule wise that really reinforces the need for you to kind of stand your ground and communicate very clearly with other people. For you, Sag, I kind of feel like this is also showing you where, with the eclipses in your 12th house, that there's some subconscious patterning that's going on. There's something going on behind the scenes, or that you're not conscious of, that's actually affecting your daily routines or your habits, and also how you're thinking. For Capricorn and Capricorn rising, you've got the Mars North Node Uranus conjunction taking place in your 5th house. It's been shaking things up with your love life. There's been suddenly falling in love, sudden breakthroughs, sudden gains, working for yourself, being creative, falling in love, getting pregnant, meeting people, taking risks, taking gambles, and kind of finding that you're getting in touch with your inner artist. Something about the square to Saturn in your 2nd is about developing those talents so that way you really can create. So I think of like Saturn in your 2nd house has been like not feeling like you have a big budget, not feeling like you're doing so hot on the self-esteem scale. Not doing as well when it comes to material possessions, feeling like you have less than. But then the question is, with Mars and Uranus in your 6th, it's like, well, how do I have fun? How do I create? How do I create from something very minimal? Whether it's working with a budget or not allowing yourself to go ham and spend a bunch of money, you know, going to concerts and going places, and where you're having to be more mindful of your resources because of something in the 5th house. So I've seen this for some people that's like, okay, I have a kid or I'm pregnant, and so now I'm having to kind of financially plan. For other people, it's like, well, I've got this, you know, business I'm trying to launch and I'm putting all of my extra resources and my time into that. It's how you're really showing your talent. So I can see something's breaking through that's been created, and now you're kind of gauging whether or not it's successful because of what you're bringing in. So for some of you guys, it can be like, well, I haven't made all of the money off of the artwork that I've sold yet. So, you know, is it good enough? And you could get really hard on yourself over it. This is important because, you know, Saturn does rule your chart. So you're going to feel this, and you got to really be strong this month in reminding yourself that you are good enough, that you are complete, that you are not numbers in a bank account, right? That cannot lead to you having a whole slew of issues with self-doubt. But I also feel like this is the pride that can come from, look what I created, you know, look what I built, look what I grew in my garden, look what I sculpted. Like there is some sense of really working with Saturn's like guidelines to be able to have fun. So it can be like, I had the baby, I launched the project, now what? Well, the money and the resources may not be coming in. You may not see that immediately, but there is still this like gratification of being like, yes, I did this, especially because this is all trining your ascendant. So there is a sense of pride in what you've created, but remember Taurus is slow. So there's something that's like slowly growing and slowly being developed. You just can't spend a ton of your resources right now on either children or having fun or dating, and anything that you do, it needs to be in moderation. It can't be you doing anything excessively because you need to be mindful of what your financial goals are. So if you are starting a new hobby or something, you're not going to go out and buy all the things. I've told a lot of people who are Cap Risings who are interested in really working with this square, if you have an interest in a hobby, rather than going out and buying all the materials, go and do a workshop with other people. You know, maybe invest a little bit in doing some distance training or taking, you know, like a webinar or learning and like seeing if you really like it. And if you feel like there's talent in that for you, and if there is, great, you can invest and you can do more. But if there isn't, you're not breaking the bank, right? For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, this is important because it involves your chart lord. So it does involve Saturn, and we're also seeing ricochets from Uranus. You're getting it both ways. We see that, you know, Mars and the North Node and Uranus are going through your fourth house of home and family. There has been lots of domestic disturbance, family disturbance, drama, fights. There's probably possibly picking up and moving and going places. This has been kind of like the theme for you, Aquarius, and you're kind of feeling like your family or your roommates or your home is in disarray. And this is challenging for you because it's already squaring your sign, right? So to have that squaring your sign in general is challenging. On top of that, you have also got the South Node in your 10th house, so you're feeling like your responsibility and your status in the world is changing. You're becoming really focused on where you can get stable, where you can get calm, where you can get quiet, where you can have peace, Taurus. And then you've also got the Sun now that's going through your 7th house, which is going to represent other people. And likely what you're going to find in this next month from some of these transits, sticking purely with the Saturn square Mars, is that you're going to have to say no to someone in the family. Likely, Saturn being in your first house is the boundary, the barrier, that no, I need my space, I can't do it, sorry, can't jump in, can't help you. And you're going to see Mars and Uranus going through the fourth, which is going to be some kind of chaotic situation, which may involve family. Mars also for you does have, you know, connections with your third house, so it can be something relating to a sibling. Mars also rules the 10th house, which is about responsibility. And anything regarding that. So intuitively, I'm like, is there going to be something going on with a parent? And you're going to be like, why do I have to take care of this? Like, why can't I call my brother or my sister and be like, hey, I need you to jump in. Like, I can't always be there. I need your help. And you're going to have boundaries about either where you're willing to overextend yourself emotionally or your home. And I would say just take that into consideration. This is more challenging for you, Aquarius, because you're going to have a lot of planets in your 7th house, which means you're dealing with some kind of challenge or open opposition. It's in Leo, so it also means that it can be about romantic partners, right, or children in some way, and back and forth about a home or a living situation, and you might be like, I'm not getting involved in that. For Pisces and Pisces rising, you have got Mars, North Node, Uranus hanging out in your third. It's speeding up your mind, how you communicate. Some of you guys want to make changes with your vehicle. Some of you guys are learning something new, a new language. You're studying astrology, maybe tarot. There can be arguments and conflicts with siblings. That's just a given. There can be conflicts over money and resources and sudden sporadic, you know, trips that you're taking. It's also in a square to Saturn in Aquarius, which is in your 12th house. So to me, it seems like there's this feeling of not always feeling like you can communicate well with other people and get the point across. You might feel like communication with friends comes in spurts, that sometimes people are really available and other times they're nowhere to be found. Saturn in your 12th is going to have you feeling a little restricted and set off from the world, so you may have challenges in actually communicating and expressing yourself because you're taking time alone to be alone. And I think both of these can also kind of deal with, because these are more mutable energies. The third house is like how we relay information, and Pisces is what we let go of. We may be finding ourselves a little bit more impulsive in communication, and it's really at odds with what our inner knowing is that we should kind of hold back, or that we should sit on things or meditate first before we say something. We can see lots of mental challenges here that can be for you as a Pisces rising, or also in regards to siblings. So there can be issues with siblings, having health problems, having mental issues, things of that nature. Pisces, be very careful when it comes to documents. Be very careful when it comes to driving, traveling, especially anything that would be like, I would say, eating and driving, something you don't want to do. Be really careful also with like making changes to a vehicle or investments, because there can be things that you don't see that could go wrong with the car. Many of you guys are feeling that you want to impulsively travel or get a document or pay for a vehicle, or take a course or take a lesson or move. And with Saturn in the 12th, it's going to keep saying to you, like, think about it, reflect on it. Am I being impatient? You know, do I need more time? Like, what is the universe telling me? You're going to see, Pisces, that as these squares set up with planets in Leo, there is going to be delays, or there can be accidents, or there can be injuries. Planets going into Leo are going to activate a square between your 6th, 12th, and 3rd house. We can make mistakes while driving, or we can make mistakes while communicating and not be totally aware of what's going on. Okay, so when in doubt, meditate, Pisces. That's going to be really helpful for you, so that way you can reflect on whether or not it's smart to say anything at all, because you might be going back and forth with like, do I send them that message? Do I just call them? And we can be really impulsive with our communication, and it can be really aggressive, and it can almost feel threatening, or that you're trying to force your will, which is not like you. And you might realize that, you know, that was coming from some kind of subconscious feeling that you've been holding back for too long, and then something kind of like breaks free in terms of the communication, you know? So guys, you know, as this next week kind of takes shape, and we start to see some of these rather, you know, rather uncomfortable, rather sudden, intense transits kind of build, you're really going to be feeling it over like the Saturday, Sunday, Monday period. Ask yourself if you're pushing it too much, if it's gonna bend to the point that it breaks, because Saturn is where things break. Mars is where we cut and we sever. We don't want to have ultimatums. We don't want to be getting forceful. We don't want to be getting aggressive. We need to remember that as we start getting into the Mars and Taurus trine Pluto, that it's going to be about planning and structure and timing and overall long-term goals, and be thinking about where we want to get to later this year, rather than trying to force something into happening right now. And that's when we start to see our anger kind of building and blowing up, and we can be very cruel and impatient and mean. And everybody's going through these transits. A lot of it is because a lot of people are experiencing things that are forcing them to change, because they have been resistant to change. And so when change happens not on our terms, likely we see lots of frustration, and we see blow-ups, right? So some of these things that are happening have been a long time coming, and I would just encourage you guys to be safe, be kind to one another. Let me know, where is this transit taking place in your charts? You want to take a look at where Taurus is and where Saturn is in Aquarius. If you don't know how to do that, you can check out a birth chart calculator online for free. You just plug in your time, date, and location of birth, and then it'll cast the chart, and you can take a look at that. If that all sounds like Latin to you and you don't know or understand what it means, consider booking a session with me. You can check out my links below at beyondtheveiltarot.com. I'd love to talk to you. I usually have about 6 to 8 weeks wait period, but my sessions are all live on Zoom. Or you can catch me on Saturday nights, where I do live readings at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time on the channel. We're doing, you know, readings pretty much every Saturday. We alternate between tarot and astrology. I will be here this Saturday doing readings. Guys, stay tuned. I'm going to be putting out this full moon in Aquarius on Sunday. It's going to come out early Sunday morning. I've been having to film these early because I've been teaching my tarot class. So that way it's going to be out bright and early for you guys, right around the time you're feeling this Mars square Saturn. Do me a favor, sharing is caring. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up and let me know where you're tuning in from. I would love to hear from you. Until Sunday, I will see all of you guys very soon. Take care.